Hello and welcome back. So far, we've gone over what codecs are, what the different formats are, and which one to use. Now, I'm going to be going over some you've run into while editing and exporting footage. Just like with recording, exporting formats also matter. With any file type, it is important to know what you are importing into Avid or Premiere and where you intend to export afterwards. Keeping the final export destination and file type in mind will prevent any issues with submitting your show, be it an HD data file, YouTube, or Blu-ray. Previously, we've gone over various Apple PRORES, uncompressed, and Avid codecs. They are all ideal for editing, since depending on your file, your MOV can be between 12 gigabytes to 240 gigabytes. Remember, a codec is a coder-decoder, and editing software like Adobe Premiere and Avid can easily play back these larger files. But online video sharing websites will not be able to upload a 200 gigabyte raw digital file. An example of a more picky video codec is the Windows Media Viewer that is only playable on computers with the Windows operating system. Apple doesn't have a file only viewable on Apple's operating system, but you will need to download a free QuickTime plugin from online to play back a .mov file if you have a Windows computer. So if you're on your Windows laptop and you're trying to play back your digital files on your SSD that you know is formatted to exFAT, and you're not hearing any audio, don't panic. You just need to download the QuickTime plugin and everything will play back just fine. Two unusual files that play on Apple or Windows computer is the .avi and .mkv file containers. AVI has been around since the early 90s and compresses files less than MOV and MPEG 2. An MKV is an open source file container developed in Russia in the early 2000s. It plays on anything and can support H.264 video and MP3 audio. You're better off not using it at all in post-production. The H.264 format is the most adaptable post-production compression type. It's most commonly seen as the MP4 codec, which is the most universally deployed codec for online streaming. It's very similar to MPEG 2, but it can compress at a higher rate without sacrificing as much HD quality. It's the codec you'll likely download when using YouTube and the type you'll see when uploading to the internet. Now say you recorded using the PRORES codec. You imported those files into Adobe Premiere and you want to have these files exported onto a playable Blu-ray disc at 1920 by 1080 HD MOV. You're going to be at a fork of the road when you have to decide, is it going to be 1080i or 1080p? Which one do you choose? To understand the difference between 1080i and 1080p, it all depends on where you want your final project exported. The P in 1080p stands for progressive scan, which means it will draw all of the lines in a single frame of video sequentially. Each line of pixels are seen at once, so videos online look extra crisp and clear. The I in 1080i stands for interlaced. It's a technique of doubling the perceived frame rate without consuming extra bandwidth, allowing TVs to refresh more frequently, showing 60 half frames rather than 30 full frames a second. It was more dominant when CRT display monitors were around, and only so much data could have been sent over a coax cable. Nowadays, more modern smart televisions can support 1080p and 1080i interlaced signals by satellite and cable services. So if you plan to export your show that is going to be broadcast on one of our stations, you would select 1080i for your Blu-ray disc, since it will be airing on TV. If this is a digital file that you will upload online, you would select 1080p. If you play an interlaced and progressive digital file simultaneously, most people won't be able to tell the difference. That is, unless you rip a DVD. Remember, DVDs are standard definition 720 by 480 media. In Edit 1, we have an MPEG STREAMCLIP software that is used to rip DVDs and convert them into digital files for editing or uploading online. So when you open the software with the DVD in the computer, select File, Export QuickTime. You'll get the movie exporter window. We only need to pay attention to a couple of things here. Like everything else with post-production, you need to pay attention to your settings. Start from the top. We have compression. We want to change that to our familiar and reliable H.264. We're going to crank the quality up to 100%. For frame size, select 720 480 DV-NTSC. This is a standard definition DVD with a standard definition frame size. We select NTSC since this is the color encoding format for North American televisions. For the frame rate, select Frame Blending, deselect Interlace Scaling, and select De-Interlaced Video instead. It's to avoid something called combing in post-production. It looks like this. See? It's terrible. De-interlacing the ripped file will prevent these awful lines from showing up, and you'll be able to edit your standard definition movie in post-production way easier. So once we have our compression, quality, frame size, and frame rate to the correct settings, we can go down to Make Movie and send our digital file to the desired location. Be aware what type of files you'll need to edit and where you want your final product to be viewed before you begin importing. It will prevent a lot of silly mistakes down the road. Well, that wraps it up for common codec problems. I'll see you next time.